Welcome, everybody. My name's Jonathan House. I'm a partner in the firm, and I have the ultimate pleasure today of interviewing Andy Woodfield and speaking to him as a fellow partner about his journey through the firm and his work that he's done on his book, his latest book, which is This Is Your Moment. I'm absolutely delighted to have this conversation with Andy, and we're going to go straight into it pretty quickly. The first thing I'd say is I was watching, settling down to watch Strictly Come Dancing results show. It was at 7 o'clock on Sunday night, and I thought I'd have a quick look at my diary for the week. And apologies to anybody else I'm meeting this week, but I saw this appointment in the diary for Wednesday at 11:45, and I thought to myself, this is going to be the most interesting part of my week, without a doubt. And I really hope it is. And I really hope it is for you too. So we're going to have a conversation with Andy to find out a little bit about the book, a little bit about his strengths-based approach and how he has worked on that over the years within PwC, and some of the real benefits and some of the challenges he's had from that. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. And Kalee's also going to be joining us as well to get some questions and answers from Andy as well, and put those questions on behalf of yourselves. I would say that it's going to be an interesting conversation because I've got no idea which sort of direction it's going to go in. So stick around, and I'm sure you'll learn as much as I'm going to learn. But I think the reason it's of interest to me, the reason I'm curious about this conversation is because, for me, mapping out your career, mapping out what you want to get involved in, mapping out what experiences you want to learn from is really quite challenging in any role, quite frankly, but certainly within a Big Four consulting role. And so for me, understanding and hearing how Andy has done that is really, really interesting. And it would be great if you would just take a moment to pause and reflect after this conversation and think, actually, so what does this mean for me? I think hopefully you'll find that as useful as I'm hoping to do as well. So I'm going to hand over to Andy just to introduce himself.
Thanks, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. Good to, well, I can't really see you, but you can see us. Nice to be with you. Nice to have an opportunity to talk about strengths. I always love to grab an opportunity to talk about strengths and uniqueness. For those that don't know me, I'm Andy Woodfield. I'm a partner in the firm in consulting, been a partner since 2006, and I've been with the firm since 1998, which is a bit disturbing. I met someone a while ago who was born in 1998, and that made me feel incredibly old. But yeah, I've got lots of things. I could talk for hours, so hopefully it'll be interesting. Jonathan's promised to ask me all the unaskable questions. In my day job, I'm a sort of a people and change, people leadership person. But my biggest responsibility, I guess, is I'm the global client partner for the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. So that's all of the embassies and high commissions around the world, and the kind of balance between delivering the government's aid strategy and the government's diplomacy strategy. So that's kind of what I do, and I can't wait to kind of get into the no holes barred questions. I think Kalee is next to introduce.
Hi, I'm Kalee Talvitie-Brown, G&HI Cluster Chair. Now, Andy and I over the years have talked many, many times about strengths and his passion around finding your strengths and how you use those throughout your career. So I'm super excited about this conversation that Jonathan and Andy are going to have, and I hope you really enjoy the session. Make sure that you put your questions in through the chat function at the bottom of your screen. The first 5 people with questions, Andy's very kindly offered to give them a signed copy of his book. I've read the book. I would recommend being one of those first 5 people with a really good quality question that comes in for the end of the session. But as I say, I hope you really enjoy it and really think a little bit more around how you can use your strengths throughout your career based on the things that Jonathan and Andy talk about. I'll see you all at the end when we've got time to ask those questions that you'll be posting throughout. So over to Jonathan and Andy.
Fantastic, fantastic indeed. So firstly, Andy, congratulations on the launch of your book, which was launched in September. I've checked on Amazon and you've got a load of 5-star reviews, which is pretty impressive. And I must warn people that on this fireside chat firstly, there's no fireside, and secondly, actually, there is product placement in this movie, and your book is product placed just behind your head. But hopefully, those first 5 people will have a copy of that book. So let's start with that then, Andy. Quite frankly, what inspired you to write the book, and how on earth did you actually get time to do it?
That's it's a good question. I've been kind of thinking about writing a book for years, and it's a bit of I suppose it's a bit of a bucket list thing that I think for many of us, like, you get to a point in your career where you've done lots of different things and seen lots of different things. And I actually think from a leadership perspective, it's good at some point in the sort of second half of your career to maybe put a stake in the ground and just kind of document what you think you might have learned. And I didn't do it from a kind of egotistical, like, everybody should read what I've got to say perspective. I did it pure. I didn't even think I would publish the book, to be honest. I did it really almost as a kind of mental health thing to ground what I think I've learned and observed about myself and life and leadership, and trying to be your best self, I guess. For many years, I've run an open workshop all around the world called Genius Power Dreams that many people may have heard of. Thousands and thousands of people have been through that program, and I trained other people to deliver that program all around the world. And in many ways, this book is almost Genius Power Dreams as a guide to realizing your potential in a book format. But I must say, I never thought I would write a book because I'm not a big reader of books. I'm very distracted when it comes to reading. I'm better with audiobooks, to be honest. I'll listen to. I just finished Billy Connolly's book in the bath. So I never thought I had the right to write a book because I'm not a big reader of books. But I had this thing where, like, a number of people came to me telling me you should write a book. And eventually I'm like, oh, for God's sake, okay, I'll try and write a book. And then I came across a fantastic lady who runs a book writing course. And I felt like all these things are coming to me for a reason. So I can't ignore this any longer. And it was in the first lockdown when I think we were all kind of struggling to work out what the hell was going on with the world. And it felt like, okay, well, maybe I could do this. So basically, I joined an 8-week book writing course where for 8 weeks, you spend 2 hours a day writing. So I did sort of 2 hours a day, first thing in the morning before work. I've sat down, writing my book. And after 8 weeks, it was written. It was actually really straightforward. And then every Friday evening, I joined a Zoom call. It was around about 7 o'clock in the evening with a whole load of other authors who were also in the same program. And being the sort of stupid competitive PwC partner, that part of me desperately had to have like the highest number of words written that week. So I kind of totally got into it. But it was remarkably therapeutic to be listened to in my writing for 2 hours a week. Like nobody listens to me for like 2 minutes a week, I don't think. But for 2 hours a day to write your thoughts, and to those of you who've read my book will know it's kind of like having a chat with me. It was like being able to talk through my learning and my experiences for 2 hours a day uninterrupted, which was fantastic.
So let me interrupt you and say it must be. So it's about strengths. It's about the challenges you've had. You must have found it a little bit emotionally draining to do this in some ways. I mean, you said it's quite therapeutic, but actually, you got to get into yourself there. And everybody's complex. I'm sure you're complex as well. Bringing that all out must be a bit emotionally draining. Or did you just sort of smash through it?
No, it was there were bits of it that were more emotional than I had thought they would be. So I'm not one for gliding kind of inauthentically over authentic things. Like those that know me know, I feel things very deeply. I'm very passionate. I think it's probably my greatest strength, but my greatest weakness as well, that I really do care about things, and things sit in my head. And sometimes I need to let them go sooner. So there were exercises that are in the book that were really difficult. But I felt it was important that I kind of go through that myself. Otherwise, why should I expect anyone else to go through it? So yeah, it was quite, there were things in there that were quite difficult. I'm a consummate oversharer anyway, but I was also conscious of how much do I share. But I must say it was easier to write than it was to review. I hated reviewing it. And I left it for a year. It wasn't until the second lockdown that I was being pestered by a publisher who wanted me to publish. And she was pestering me to get it reviewed. And I'm like, isn't that what you do? Like, you're a reviewer. Like, I just like write the thing. Like, you can have it now. Like, just do what you like with it. And she said, no, you have to do the first review. And I found it very difficult to do the review. And I noticed the bits I'd written when I was in a bad mood. So I had to go in and smooth some edges off. And I had a wonderful team of actually clients and different people that I've known over the years who read my first draft and gave me some fantastic advice on the use of language. And one of my good friends I was a trustee with, who's the chair of a mental health charity, and I'd use the term crazy. Some people think I'm crazy. He said, can you not use the word crazy? There are things that I smoothed out. Well, hopefully I haven't smoothed it out too much to not kind of leave the juicy bits out. There's lots of juicy stuff in there.
Juicy stuff. Excellent. I'd expect nothing less from you, Mr. Woodfield. So we've talked about the process of how you've done it. Let's get into some of the meat of it. And your real focus is on strengths and focusing on people's strengths rather than just thinking about working harder, working longer, focusing on their strengths to develop their potential. Is that waffle, or do you believe it? And just explain it.
No, I mean, we've all spent most of our childhoods and our careers really in various feedback sessions being told at. And it's all usually hugely well-intentioned, but the result of it often is that we focus on our weaknesses, so the things that we're not good at. And then, you know what it's like, John, like you can be in a feedback session and there'll be lots of wonderful things said, and then there'll be some things that you need to do better. That's the only thing we put our attention on. It's like, I've immediately forgotten all the good stuff. I mean, Kalee's my PRP. Kalee's wonderful at, this is what you're great at. This is how you can be even better. I mean, Kalee frames it beautifully, and that really helps me. But I immediately forget all the things I've done really well, and I immediately focus on the stuff I could do better. So we are naturally pushed towards a focus on our weaknesses. And the reality is, and this isn't just my view, it's backed up by a huge amount of research from a load of big universities and also by the whole positive psychology movement, that if we only focus on our weaknesses, we can only really ever be average and ordinary. And the best thing we can do is to respect and understand and acknowledge our weaknesses, but to really push ourselves out of our comfort zone in our area of strength. That's where our potential is. So often we find that an over focus on weakness, and even if we don't focus on it, we naturally do because of the environment we're in and our natural tendency to want to be better and to want to be part of something. But if we over focus on it, we can only really hope to be average. And unfortunately, it can make us miserable. It drains our energy. It can make us unhealthy, and we don't really do what we could really. It doesn't help us unlock our potential. So it's not just waffle. It really is. It's important. When I talk to clients about this, I always say to them, tell me why you think you can pay to have your staff turn up every day and not be the best that they can be. So if you've got enough money for them to come in and be average and to focus on being average, then great. You've obviously got a lot of money to spend. But given that you've got who you've got, why wouldn't you want them to be the very best that they can be? And that's the overriding philosophy of this strengths work, okay. I would say.
So listen, I'll be surprised if there's anybody watching this call now or on playback, on demand, or on Netflix. I'd be surprised if there's anybody who doesn't agree with that, particularly from a big four, particularly from PwC, where everybody is just naturally so ambitious and also naturally wants to be the very best person they can be. And I absolutely get it. When you get that feedback, you hear all the really, really good stuff, then you hear that one negative thing, and that's all you think about. How is this philosophy that you've got here? How's that been challenging to sort of use within PwC? It's because what have you found challenging about that philosophy and the way you've deployed it within the firm?
I mean, firstly, I would say we generally are desperate to tell people what's wrong with them. Like there's a desperate urge for us to tell people what's wrong with them and to get them to fit in. And it's well-meaning, but we recruit geniuses and then we fire idiots and we wonder what happened to them. And what generally happened to them was, we took this really unique, distinctive person and we told them how things get done around here. And we forced them into a single consistent way of working. And for many people, that means giving up who they really are. And that's the challenge, I think, is how do you deal with the fact that we all want to be part of something? How do you deal with the fact that we've got systems and processes and governance, which is very important, and we've got a set of responsibilities to deliver upon, but at the same time, really be distinctive, be your full, true self, your unique self, and really excel and unlock your potential. And often those things are pitted against each other. So it's like you can only have one or the other. But actually, as a partner, I've got a set of responsibilities I have to deliver on, but that's not who I am. But even the language of partner tends to push you back towards, Andy is a partner. When I became a partner, it's like you become this thing. Well, actually, no, I'm not. I'm Andy. I happen to be employed as a partner, which is a set of responsibilities. Now, within those responsibilities, there are lots of things I do naturally well, and there are lots of things I don't do naturally well, but I can't get rid of those responsibilities. I have to manage those. And then I think it's my responsibility to unlock my potential and my uniqueness, my distinctiveness. And I think what can happen is, especially when times are tough, we just want people to be the same. And to be honest, it's all about diversity and inclusion and a diverse way of thinking and being. And strength is really the key to unlocking this. But it's very difficult because, number one, we want to be part of something. We want to be part of the culture. Our culture is very specific in PwC. It's very milestone, action, stakeholder managed, focused. It's not great at thinking and creativity and innovation. It tends to be more predominantly about milestones and actions and managing your stakeholders. And yet both cultures are very, very, ways of working are very important.
So what advice then would you be giving to senior associates, managers, etc., in terms of how they can get the most out of this as an approach, and what should they really be doing differently? Because I think you've naturally described it well in terms of the approach that happens within the firm, but also in other firms, and also within our clients as well. We get these reflections from our clients as well. What advice would you give to somebody senior associate, manager level, in terms of how to make this real and how to make it authentic, as you've said?
Yeah, I think the first thing I always say to people who've just been promoted or people who've just been recruited is, you've got the job already. So don't keep trying to prove yourself because you already got the job. Now somebody's seen something in you. They believe that you're the right person for that job. So when you join, please don't give up that uniqueness, that distinctiveness that got you the job in order to work out how things are done at PwC and then lose who you are. In the same way, when you get promoted to manager or senior manager or director or to partner, don't suddenly give up what made you distinctive enough to get you to that promotion. So look at your strengths and explore your strengths. The book will guide you through a process of looking at yourself and your strengths from 3 very different perspectives, and start to appreciate that is actually who you are. Anyone who works for PwC today is too old to change who they are. Like, that is who you are. So if you don't like it, it's tough. You best start to love who you are and be better and better at that stuff. So I would say, don't give up on who you are, because that's why you got promoted. That's why you were recruited. Don't waste your time trying to prove yourself. Start exploring your strengths and look at how you can apply those strengths. But at the same time, don't forget your responsibilities. But don't mix up your responsibilities with who you are and what you need to do.
So this, I think that's a good point. And in the book itself, you talk about emotional intelligence sometimes being replaced with sort of, in quote marks, professionalism. What on earth did that mean?
Well, so I think having really reflected on this, I think we've had this kind of idea of professionalism, which is that you're not emotional, that you're not necessarily passionate about something, you're very process focused. And it's not good to show that you really care about something, or you're passionate about something, or that you're vulnerable, or that you're upset, or you're really excited. It's better to be more neutral and unemotional, and we've kind of labeled that as professionalism. I mean, if you look at over the weekend, if you look at Alok Sharma's interviews following the closeout of COP, he felt that he needed to repeatedly apologize for his emotion. And he apologized, and he said repeatedly in different interviews over the weekend that it was because he hadn't had much sleep, and he apologized for his emotion. But the guy's he's a human being. You know, his emotion, his passion, that's a strength. We shouldn't have to apologize for being passionate, for being emotional, for being human. And, you know, in my view, you know, the world now needs to be led by more people that are comfortable with their emotions, are comfortable to be passionate and say they're passionate about something, and not just kind of monotone, neutral, or using, you know, even worse, using passionate and emotional language from a script would be awful, because you're almost weaponizing authentic language. I always say to people, like, everyone wants to be authentic these days. It's very fashionable, but you can't fatten the pig on market day. And a lot of leaders have been very successful at not being emotional, being professional, and not showing emotion. And I really believe, you know, people want to see real human beings, real leaders who fail, who are emotional, that embrace their vulnerability. That is the key to leadership going forward from my perspective.
And listen, I can understand that, but there will be people out there watching this who may be a little bit more like me. I can think of a couple, but not many, who would struggle with that. You know, would really struggle, because they've grown up in organizations like PwC or some other organizations where, you know, it wasn't the done thing to show emotion. It wasn't the done thing to, you know, as Alok Sharma did, you know, tear up during the presentation. He was really, really upset by it. That's not the done thing within organizations in some respects. And if you've been in a firm like ours for 10, 15 years, you've adopted to that style of leadership. What advice would you give to somebody like me who maybe struggles to show that and finds that uncomfortable?
I would encourage you and others to try it, to put your face right into that situation. And the reason being, and the research kind of backs this up, is that if we are, like I'm a gay bloke, right? So I spent my whole life editing myself, trying to fit in, trying not to show up as being gay, working out how to accept that myself, and not wanting it to be a big issue. I wanted to be Andy. He's a great guy. He happens to be a partner. Oh, by the way, he's gay, not the other way around. Right, so I get conforming, I get editing ourselves, I get trying to be in a mold that makes you acceptable as part of a club, which is kind of how it feels, right? But the reality is that people perform better when they can be themselves. The emotional energy that we put into trying to appear to be professional is emotional energy we need on the task at hand. Like, none of us today know what's ahead of us. We can no longer lead based on experience and knowing the answer. We can only now lead based on curiosity and exploration and a preparedness to fail, because failure is part of success, not the opposite of it. So in doing that, we have to embrace our vulnerability. And, you know, research again would tell you that if you can't embrace your vulnerability, you can't embrace any emotion. So you become an emotionless shell, which is awful. Like, I couldn't bear that. But the big reason from a business perspective is that we will all be better leaders at all levels within the organization if we don't waste our time on our performance as if we were actors, but we use that emotional energy, that emotional capacity, to really work out what's so-and-so thinking? Where are we going with this idea? What are there different ways of approaching this issue, as opposed to how do I appear? Am I looking professional? What are people going to think of me? All that is wasted emotional energy that should be, and I would suggest really ought to be, on the task at hand. That's why we are employed by the firm and by our clients to solve amazing, intricate problems.
So you're a gay bloke. I'm a straight bloke. You've talked about feeling in a place where, just putting it out there. Just you talked about being in a place where you felt you've had to edit yourself, etc. It's
Yeah.
exactly the same for me. I
Yeah.
will be in organisations like PwC previously where you have to edit the way you present yourselves because you think that's the dumb thing to do. So it is difficult, but as you say, you've got to put your face into it and get on with it. What advice, though, would you give to people who work with leaders in the organisation who maybe struggle with this? How can they help with this? Because there'll be some people who will absolutely get it and absolutely feel the need that they could do this and benefit from it. But they may have a leader or they may work with somebody who doesn't. What advice would you give those people to help people, maybe like me, who are maybe a little bit more straight, a little bit more edited, as you suggest?
I think firstly, realize that everybody's got their own challenges and their own struggles. Like we all come to work every day and none of us really know what we're all going through. So firstly, I try not to judge, and I kind of tell myself today I will not judge, because I don't. I mean, Jonathan, I don't know what you're dealing with in your life, your family. You don't know what I'm dealing with my life and my family. Just like a massive drama at the moment because my grandmother just died and my mum and my uncle hate each other, and there's like a huge big drama about my nan's funeral and my mum's refusing to go to the funeral, and this is like ever-present drama, right? So we've all got stuff going on in our families, with our friends, our kids, et cetera, et cetera. So firstly, I think it's really important just to appreciate that we all, the struggle is real, right, for all of us. It doesn't matter, different folks will have different types of struggles, so but everybody's got a struggle. So I think that's really important. The big thing, I think, and it's the only thing anyone remembers from this presentation would be about it's really around how you get feedback, because I think this mechanism helps people to think differently. And I would always encourage people to tell people when they saw them at their best and be specific about it. When was it? What did you do? What was the impact of what you did? Are there any things you could do to do that more often? And also to expect that kind of feedback back in return. And what that tends to do, it tends to make people think differently. The other advice I would have, and I've worked with some pretty difficult people in the past, the other advice I would have is to find something you admire about them. They may be a complete pig and maybe a bad person, but to be honest, I wasted way too many years of my life wondering whether somebody is a good or a bad person. It's none of my business. And my job is to make sure I'm the best version of me that I can be. My job isn't to judge others and to work out if they're good or bad. But for me to be the best version of me, it often helps me with someone I'm having a difficult relationship with to find something that I admire about them and to focus on that. And then when I'm talking to them and I'm giving them feedback, to tell them when I see them at their best and to try to put the other stuff to one side, because that's their challenge to deal with.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, and I think that goes to answer the question, and just reflecting on all you said there is, don't waste a load of emotional energy trying to be somebody you're not. Remember what you got. Remember what got you into the role you're doing, because that's the thing people want to see. And I think that seeing something positive in everybody is going to be a way of helping them as well. And actually, when you see somebody expand and reveal some emotions, that's probably the thing that is going to help them develop. And because it's a responsibility of us all. Last question from me is there another book in you?
I've got 3 more books that I've agreed to write. The next one is called Big Words, Small Actions. And I'm going to be taking 5 big sort of world-changing topics and trying to deconstruct them from those big, like net zero is one of them, climate, and turn them into small manageable actions that we can all do ourselves. So I'm going to take 5 topics, big sort of, well, cloud is another one. It's like blah, 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 cloud. Like explain it clearly in plain and simple English, and then try and help people understand what does that really mean for business and for them as individuals. So it's called Big Words, Small Actions, the next one. And then I've got a bunch of, I've been asked to write a fiction based on a professional services firm. But I feel like that's probably more career limiting than I'm prepared to go for at the moment. So,
and loads of people will be wondering which particular
I don't think it will
subject
take much to. Yeah, it won't take much to work it out.
Listen, Andy, I've really
Yeah.
enjoyed this conversation, and I wish it could go on longer. But the questions I've asked hopefully have got people going. I'm sure Kalee now, I'll hand over to her, has probably got some questions from the audience as well. So, on behalf of me, Andy, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Jonathan.
So, Andy, tons of questions have come in. We're not going to get through them all in the few minutes that we have left. We've got about 10 more minutes, and then I'll do a very, very quick wrap up at the end. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. We're going to do relatively quick fire, just to give a flavor for some of the answers so we can get through as many as possible. But as I said, because there's been so many questions that have come through, I think one of the things that we'll take away is maybe we just have another Q&A session that we record and get out there to answer even more of the questions, because it's been hard to pick which ones I'm going to go with. But starting point. One of the questions was really around, if your perspective is that your differences are actually drawbacks rather than strengths, how do you reframe your thinking? And I don't mean you, I mean you in a sort of wider sense. So if someone's got that perspective, which is my differences are actually drawbacks, how can I think about them as strengths?
Well, firstly, I would say, you were born to stand out. You weren't born to fit in. Unfortunately, you're wrong. What makes you distinctive are your strengths, but all of our strengths, when overplayed, can appear to be weaknesses. So it's true for everybody that our strengths, when overplayed, can be weaknesses. I mean, I would say this, and I was asked to do this session. I'm not mindlessly promoting my book, by the way, but I would say the first half of the book is really a really simple way of trying to work that out. By the book. Well, now you're going to get whoever submitted that question is going to get the book. So work through the book, and you'll find out. But your strengths and your differentiators are your strengths. But strengths overplayed or not really understood well can also be weaknesses.
Now I'm going to have to caveat that I'm not necessarily asking these questions in the order they came in. So every question I ask isn't necessarily going to get a book, but I'm just going to say that now. But that one was a very early one, so it's in the first 5. All right, so we've talked quite a lot around personal strengths and thinking about one's own strengths. How do you take the ethos of strengths and bring that into the team environment to maximize the collective strengths of the team and to really make sure that you're valuing the differences of teams? What's your view on that?
Well, I mean, then that's the next logical step. That if you can understand and respect your own uniqueness, your own strengths, the next challenge is, well, how do you build a team that's built upon those strengths as opposed to built upon generic roles? So it's much more effective to build teams and mobilize teams based on a knowledge of people's individual strengths. I would love to see PwC resource based on declared and understood strengths. We would have much stronger teams and much more effective and happy teams if we did that. But unfortunately, we tend to build teams based on a role. And we default to this kind of idea of a role. It's a very old-fashioned way of doing things. So I did this work actually with the Deals leadership quite a few years ago, and the Deals partners started to deploy based on strength, and they were much more effective. So I mean, it requires you to care a little bit, which is a lovely word that we use a lot, to care a little bit about each other, in order to understand each other more than just the role. And then when you do understand and you respect and you listen and you hear each other, then you can then really be much more powerful, I would say, by deploying and building teams based on a collective strength. But the second half of the book is all about how you do that.
Fantastic, and I do well know that. So there's a whole raft of questions around that balance between focusing on our strengths, but then also thinking about, well, we do need to develop and grow and so on, and there might be some things that we have to address that maybe is perceived as a weakness, but they're important. Maybe it's some of the hygiene factor things that we need to be successful in our career and so on. So, like I said, quite a number of questions that are either, how do we not swing too far on strengths? Or can you get a balance between focusing on strengths, but also continuing to develop some of those things that maybe we're not so good at? Perspectives on that?
I would say, I would just notice the question. The question comes from a desperate desire for us to fit in, a desperate desire for everyone to be the same, a desperate desire to conform. And I understand it and I get it and I feel it myself. That's where that questioning comes from. Surely we can't be unique. Surely we can't unlock our individual potential because we have to be the same. No. Don't mix up, I would say. Don't mix up. Well, you can do what you like, obviously. Everyone must live their own lives. Don't mix up responsibilities with who you are and your strengths. If you want to be the best version of yourself, your best self, you've got to explore your uniqueness and your strengths. But you also have a set of responsibilities. Now, how you choose to manage those is up to you. Now, I have long sat next to people who are much better at some of the things I'm rubbish at than I am. But I think it's kind of stupid to expect them to spend their life working on the things I'm naturally good at, and for me to spend my life working on things that they're naturally good at, and then we'll all just be miserable. Like, why would you do that? And we'll all actually be average at those things. We'll never excel at those things. So it's a much smarter leader that seeks to understand uniqueness and strength and deploy based on it. And when we're not going to forgive people for not delivering on their responsibilities. You've got to do the basics, but you're responsible to work out how to get that done. It doesn't mean you have to do all of those things yourself, but you never give away the responsibility or the accountability for it. But if there's someone who's brilliant at it, who loves spreadsheets, who loves whatever, work with them, build them up, help them. That's part of building a team. But we don't all need to be the same. If we seek all to be the same, we will all be average and miserable, and we will not unlock our potential. But that doesn't mean that we give up our responsibilities. So I think that's the key thing. Don't mix up your strengths and your potential with your responsibilities.
I think that's a really good point there, that we do have to have the balance, but it isn't one over the other. It is making sure that you think about the teams around you and how do you work together as a team and make sure you've got that right mix of skills and capabilities, but also continue to develop yourself. So I think that that's absolutely right. I mean, I do think there's also a bit here for all of us, and you've made the comment a couple of times, it's super important. The reason that we have all these great people in PwC is because we want the different strengths, the different uniquenesses, all those things that come with all the individuals we have. But at the same time, day to day, it can feel super hard to focus on your strengths. And I know, again, there's been a range of questions that are kind of like, how do I keep focused on my strengths when I've got so many demands on time, so many roles? I might be in a job that, or very specific client piece of work that's just really maybe draining some of my energy, et cetera. So how do I remain focused on strengths when there's so much that's being asked of me? And how do I keep bringing that person that we really want everyone to bring to work?
I mean, it's really hard. So firstly, I would just acknowledge it's hard. I mean, I have run strength workshops for thousands and thousands of PwC people all over the world, and literally, and I'm not exaggerating for the point of exaggeration, thousands of clients as well. And I have then walked out of running those workshops and gone and done completely the opposite, and told people what's wrong with them. It's really hard, and I've even written a book about it, and I still find it difficult. It's a constant challenge because. If we have a difficult time like with COVID, or you have a difficult financial period of time where performance is not good, or whether you're resource constrained, in these moments, it becomes very difficult. I would just acknowledge it's not easy. You don't have to be your best self every day. It's not possible. Sometimes you're just going to have an awful day and you just embrace the awful day, and then work on it the next day. So give yourself a break. I think, to the extent in which you can, wallow in it. And when you're ready to explore your strengths and uniqueness, take that opportunity, and you will fall backwards and you will move forwards. And that's just the natural kind of rhythm of life. I feel like a Lion King song coming on.
I can't sing, so I won't be singing it, but you could hum it in the background while I ask the next question, if that's what you feel happening next. So again, you touched on client there, and I know you spoke earlier around. Actually, I know that some of your clients you've shared the book with, but also in developing the book, you interacted with clients. And I also know, being your PRP, that when you are interacting with your clients, you are very much around strength-based conversations with your clients and bringing your authentic self and having your clients bring their authentic selves into the conversations and the interactions. Thinking about that, and just thinking about some of the questions that have come through, what happens if somebody, whether that's a client or whether that's someone on the team that you're on or outside in your life more widely, don't value your strengths? What do you do?
Well, what other people think of you is none of your business. It's what you think of you that's important. So, you can't live your life desperately wanting to be valued by other people. The biggest challenge that we all have in our lives is, do we value ourselves? So if we can't value and respect ourselves, we're not in a position to be effective and value and respect others. So if other people don't value and respect you, that's their journey. I wouldn't take on that challenge. Your job is to be the best version of yourself that you can be, and to know where you are with that. Other people will be going through their own things, and sometimes their own struggle and their own challenge manifests as them attacking you. That most people, and we've talked about this, Kalee, but most people don't come to work to make my life difficult, but sometimes it feels like that. But that's often about where they're coming from. And sometimes our positivity and our focus and the things we're trying to achieve on our journey kind of screws with their journey, because they're like, well, hang on, you can't do that, because this is how this works, and I'm doing this, and I find it really difficult. So therefore, how can you do that and be okay with it? I was like, well, I'm sorry for you that my joy is upsetting you, but perhaps you need to work on that on your own. I'm not going to take that on myself. So I would say, just be careful that you don't take on everybody's idea of what you should and shouldn't be. It's important that you know who you are. And this book is really about spending a little moment to get to know who you are and love and respect that, and then work from there. It's not going to make you hate and not hate yourself any more or less. But it's a journey, to hope. I always feel like the day before I die, I'll be a fully formed, decent human being, and then I'll die, and then I'll move on to whatever's next. But until then, I'm screwing things up, failing all over the place, having bad days, having amazing days. It's all part of the mix. But I cannot take responsibility for what everyone else thinks of me. I'm just trying to be the best I can be and the best version of myself.
Thank you, Andy. And that is a wonderful place to end. Huge thank you to you, not just simply for the last 45 minutes, but from the many conversations we've had over the years around strengths. And also, again, I really enjoyed the book as well and had a lot of personal reflection throughout. So thank you for that. Big thank you to Jonathan for also being part of today's live stream and webcast.